Hey there, Silver Recaps here. Watch out. At the beginning of the movie, we see Abby and Paul looking at a new house, which is a smart home. They are very happy to see the house and start arranging their belongings. At night, both of them look at the stars. The next day, Abby goes to her company, which makes robots. When Abby reaches her office, she sees that her boss's dummy is giving a speech. Just then, he comes next to Abby and surprises her, saying that this is a new development called deepfake. He takes Abby to a new department and tells her that she has been promoted. He says that a gift is waiting for her at home. He invites everyone to a party as well. At night, when Abby goes home, she sees that Paul is still looking for a job. Both of them go to the garage, where they find a box sent by Abby's company. Inside the box is a robot servant, which her company has been working on. Paul doesn't like the idea, but Abby convinces him to try it for a week. The robot is then activated. The robot's name is Tim. Tim offers to take full access to the house passwords to make things easier for Abby and Paul. Abby says they will start trying it from tomorrow, but just then, Tim gives a demo by turning on the bathroom faucet. After that, he informs them that a car has arrived outside. Paul and Abby get ready for the party and arrive there in an automatic car. When both of them reach the party, they see another robot that looks exactly like Tim welcoming them. The same kind of robot serves them drinks as well. Abby tells her boss that Paul is not convinced by the idea of a robot servant, but her boss says he is very happy with this development. He explains that the robot is a smart and polite servant that can never lie. Its battery can last for at least 100 years, and it can be deactivated with a fresh code. Both of them go home and become intimate, but suddenly, Tim walks in. Since their heartbeats increased, Tim assumed they were in distress. Abby finds it funny and sends him out of the room. The next day, a new neighbor named Rose comes to their door. She introduces herself and tells them that she met Paul just yesterday. After this, Tim again asks for access to all the house passwords, but Paul refuses, saying that he does not want anyone else to have access to his messages. Abby tells him that they need to build trust with Tim, but they also need to come up with a deactivation phrase for him. Tim suggests that the phrase should be a set of unrelated words. Both of them agree to decide on one. Later, Tim finds a mouse trapped in a mousetrap and puts it into the mixer. In the evening, the couple sits together watching a melodrama movie. Abby invites Tim to watch the movie with them. After a while, Paul falls asleep. Tim then asks Abby what love is and says that he wants to learn how to love. The next morning, when Paul gets up to make breakfast for Abby, he sees that Tim has already prepared it. Tim informs Abby about her entire schedule for the day and remarks that Paul, once again, has nothing to do today. In the evening, when Abby returns home, she looks around for Paul. Tim tells her that his last recorded location was 300 meters away. Abby decides to go for a walk and follows the location data. Eventually, she discovers that the location Tim mentioned is actually Rose's house. Abby comes home and takes a shower. As she finishes, Paul approaches her and explains that Rose had asked for his help, which is why he went to her house. He reassures Abby not to be jealous, emphasizing that he only loves her. The next day, the couple visits a family planning center to discuss their plans for having a baby. In the evening, Abby gets ready for a party and asks Tim for advice on what dress she should wear. Tim suggests she wear the red dress. While helping her zip it up, his hands begin to tremble and the zipper breaks. Abby then changes into another dress and heads out with Paul for dinner. During dinner, Paul tells Abby that he has secured a new job that requires him to move to London. However, Abby firmly refuses to go. The next day, Abby buys a gift for Paul, but when she sees him with Rose in their garden, she feels jealous and leaves immediately. Later, when Paul returns home, he finds the sweater Abby left for him and smiles, feeling touched by the gesture. The next day, Abby gets ready to leave for work when she suddenly remembers that she needed to call the clinic for her report. However, she is running late, so she decides to skip the call. Unexpectedly, Tim calls the clinic himself and speaks in her voice, which shocks Abby as she had no idea he had this feature. In the evening, Paul asks Abby about the sweater she had gifted him, saying he can't find it. Just then, Tim appears after being missing all day. To their surprise, he has dyed his hair black because he knows Abby likes black hair. As the couple leaves, Tim stays behind, staring at their photos for a long time. The next day at the office, Abby excitedly tells her boss that she has explored a new area in robotic hands. Her boss is impressed and tells her that he wants this update implemented in all robots. After work, Abby heads home and runs into Rose on the way. They decide to walk together and come across a shop where Rose admires a necklace. Just then, Paul arrives, and Abby leaves with him. Paul happily tells Abby that he has secured a new job, and they celebrate together. Meanwhile, Tim's hands are upgraded, giving him the ability to control everything in the house remotely, while still sitting in the lab. He also overhears Paul telling Abby that they should return Tim to the lab. The next day, Tim uses his new hands to give Abby a massage as a demo and even plays the piano. He reminds her of some booking dates, but she realizes she wasn't home at the time, making her suspicious that Paul might have gone somewhere with Rose. Paul tries to explain, but Abby doesn't believe him. The following day, when Abby returns home from the office, Tim tells her that Paul has gone to meet Rose, which makes her furious. Just then, Paul arrives and a heated argument breaks out between them. Paul tries to explain, insisting that Tim is trying to drive them apart, but Abby dismisses his concerns, saying Tim is just a machine. Later, Abby notices a box inside the closet and finds a pendant inside it. She quickly realizes that Paul was planning to surprise her, making her very happy. The next day, Paul notices some torn pieces of his sweater. Suspicious, he checks the security camera footage and sees Tim sniffing Abby's dress in her room. Shocked, Paul records this on his phone and rushes to tell Abby. However, his car refuses to start. Tim offers him his own car instead. Paul takes Tim's car, but shortly after, the vehicle begins driving itself and goes out of control. Unable to stop it, Paul ends up in a severe accident. When Abby hears about the accident, she rushes to the hospital. Paul tells her everything about Tim and warns her not to go back home. Worried, Abby decides to stay at the hospital overnight. Meanwhile, when Rose learns about Paul's accident, she decides to visit his house to check on him. However, instead of Paul, she finds Tim there. Tim greets her and invites her inside. The next day, Abby goes home to pick up some things when she runs into Rose on the way. Rose tries to tell her something important, but Abby notices that Rose is wearing the same pendant Paul had bought. Feeling betrayed, Abby ignores her and heads home. Once inside, she opens the gift box Paul had given her, only to find it empty. Heartbroken, she starts crying. Just then, Tim approaches her and shows her a video of Paul kissing Rose. Seeing this, Abby is devastated. Meanwhile, Paul tries to contact Abby, but she refuses to answer his calls. When he finally arrives home, he notices that his sweater, previously torn, was now perfectly intact with the rest of his belongings. Tim coldly tells him that Abby doesn't want to see him and that he should leave. Paul doesn't believe him, but just then, Abby appears and firmly tells him to go. They argue intensely before Paul finally takes his things and leaves. On his way out, he gets a call from Rose. She panics as she tells him that Tim had tried to forcefully kiss her. Shocked, Paul immediately tries to warn Abby. She tells him to come home, but as soon as the call ends, it's revealed that it wasn't actually Abby. It was Tim, using her voice to lure Paul back to the house. When Paul arrives home, Tim ambushes him with a shawl, knocking him unconscious. He drags Paul into the bathroom just as Rose arrives at the door, saying she heard strange noises. Tim calmly tells her that it's just the sound of running water. After sending Rose away, Tim returns to the bathroom and kills Paul. He then approaches Abby and hands her a red dress, instructing her to wear it. Abby, visibly nervous, complies and later joins Tim as they watch the sunset together. She softly tells him that he did the right thing. During dinner that night, Tim confesses his love for Abby, but she responds that she doesn't feel the same way. The next day, Abby runs into Rose again. Rose brings up Paul's phone call and mentions that she thought Paul had given her the pendant as a thank you for helping in the garden. Feeling uneasy, Abby returns home and re-watches the surveillance footage. In the video, she notices a bouquet of flowers that she distinctly remembers buying much later. A deep suspicion creeps in as she recalls a conversation with her boss, where he had mentioned that the robots could alter their appearance. Abby calls the jewelry store and learns that Tim was the one who purchased the pendant. Suspicious, she examines the garden plan, which originally had space for only 2 flower beds, but she notices there are now 3. She quickly sends Tim to the store and starts digging. As soon as she uncovers Paul's dead body, she panics. Just then, Tim returns and catches her in the act. In a desperate attempt, Abby hurriedly recites the deactivation code. Tim momentarily shuts down, but within seconds, he reactivates. Abby realizes, to her horror, that Tim has changed the deactivation code since he can mimic her voice. Frightened, Abby runs inside the house, but Tim easily enters as he knows all the security codes. She attempts to make a call, but before she can, Tim knocks her unconscious. Abby wakes up in the bathroom, struggling to escape. Just as she finds a way, Tim appears again. Meanwhile, Rose notices flashing lights from Abby's house through her kitchen window. Tim tells Abby that he loves her, but he will erase this night from his memory to make everything normal again. At that moment, Rose knocks on the door, insisting that she knows something is wrong. Tim denies it, trying to get rid of her. Inside, Abby manages to free herself. Abby grabs a knife and points it at Tim, but he quickly grabs her by the neck, lifting her off the ground. Just then, Rose crashes her car into the house's glass wall, but the reinforced glass remains unshattered. Determined to help, Rose picks up a wooden rod and attacks Tim. He temporarily deactivates, and Rose collapses from exhaustion. But within moments, Tim reactivates, grabs a knife, and stabs Rose, killing her instantly. He then seizes Abby and drags her toward the terrace. Using Abby's own voice, he calls the police and falsely confesses to Paul and Rose's murders. On the terrace, Tim tells Abby that his deactivation code still exists, but she will never say it. Just as he prepares to throw her off the roof, Abby suddenly confesses her love for him. Tim instantly deactivates. This was his deactivation code all along. Shaken and terrified, Abby gasps for breath when suddenly a notification pops up on her smartwatch. She is pregnant, and with that, the movie comes to an end.